Hello, everybody, and welcome to our launch event. So that's me, Netta Spiro, Reader in Performance Science at the Royal College of Music. And
I'm Katie Rose Sanfilippo. I'm a research fellow at the Centre for Healthcare Innovation Research at City University London.
So we're really delighted to welcome you to this book launch, introducing our new book. It's called Collaborative Insights Interdisciplinary Perspectives on Musical Care Throughout the Life Course. In today's celebration, we'll be introducing the book mainly through a series of videos that we made that were inspired by the book. And we're going to hear responses to the book by 3 eminent speakers with different perspectives. And we'll also be hearing from some of the chapter authors. We're also going to be introducing a new network, Musical Care International, which is an international and interdisciplinary network for researchers and practitioners working on musical care throughout the life course. And you can sign up to that network using a link that will pop in the chat shortly. You can also find a link to our new website in the chat in a little bit. But mainly today we'll be talking about the book and thanking and celebrating all of those involved in the creation of the book. And that's the authors and the reviewers and a whole pile of other people as well, some of whom are here online with us today. So first I'm going to say a few words by way of introduction, and then we'll play some of those videos. Why did we invite this team of 17 authors to a project like this? So as we write in the acknowledgements in the book, the idea of the book began as a response to a series of questions that we had often discussed. We were asking ourselves, could we provide a brief introduction about music in different care contexts? Could we bring experts from different disciplines to the multifaceted world of music and its different roles in care? Could we seek an understanding of the vast range of music engagement in care contexts throughout the life course while not sacrificing details too much? So we landed on a brief edited book, bringing together authors from different disciplines for each chapter to explore this work throughout the life course. We also landed on a new term, musical care, to describe the role of music listening, as well as music making, in supporting any aspect of people's developmental or health needs. So like physical and mental health, cognitive and behavioral development, and interpersonal relationships. And we decided on a structure, looking at the life course. We did that because we thought the life course structure highlights the connections and themes present in approach, context, and practices throughout our lives. We also included a call for future interdisciplinary work, which we hope paves the way for new endeavours. Of course, you can just go ahead and order the book. We'll pop links in the chat. And you should be able to find a discount code there as well shortly. It's out in the US and it's almost out here in the UK.
So along with the book, we really wanted to create a series of videos that would be accessible to a general audience, as well as useful for teaching or any sort of public engagement. So we really wanted to inform, inspire, and invite people to engage with the ideas of the book in a different form. So we wanted to communicate about research in the sciences and the arts through an art form, and we chose animated videos to do that. And we also had specially composed music as part of this video series. So we did this work with Nick Blatt from Fat Panda, who helped produce the animations and the videos. And we also worked with Daniel Chant-Burgess, who created the music for each video. So we'd like to play 4 of the videos for you now, and we'll play more a little bit later. Daniel and Nick are here on the calls. So if you have any questions for them, do pop them in the chat, and we'll have time a little bit later on today where you can discuss with them and ask them some questions about their perspectives on this very collaborative process that we did. So this is really the first time that the whole series is being played in public. We're very excited. So here are the first 4 videos. So if the stream doesn't work well, we're going to also pop in a YouTube channel link. So if your stream isn't working well, you can watch them on the YouTube channel. But hopefully it should work well. Also get your popcorn and snacks out. So thanks so much, everyone.
We can encounter music throughout our lives. This can be in our everyday activities, like listening to music when we travel to work, hearing music while we shop, or when we sing to our children as we care for them. It can also be in more targeted ways and situations, like music interventions in classrooms or hospitals, or other educational or healthcare settings. Music, whether we listen to it or make it, can support various aspects of our developmental, educational, cognitive, interpersonal, or health needs. Musical care is when music supports us in these ways. Musical care can involve singing, dancing, playing instruments, listening to music, or a combination of all of these. We may do these alone or with others. While all known societies engage in activities that appear to be musical, the music of different cultures can take different forms and may appear to fulfill different functions. Musical care practices throughout the life course and around the world are wide-ranging and change over time. Given the variety of musical care practices, understanding musical care requires people from many different areas of expertise and disciplines to come together, leading to interdisciplinary research. Musical care happens throughout the life course, from the prenatal stage to the end of life. This video series introduces what we know about musical care throughout the life course. Each video focuses on one life stage: infancy, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, older adulthood, and end of life. Even though musical care has been part of life for a very long time, there are many open questions regarding the evidence and possible reasons for its potential beneficial effects. We hope this series inspires you to develop your research or practice in connection to musical care, participate in research projects, or learn more about the area. This series of videos is inspired by a book we edited called Collaborative Insights Interdisciplinary Perspectives on Musical Care Throughout the Life Course. We hope you enjoy this series.
Musical care in infancy involves care for the infant, their caregivers, and the relationship between them. A lot of musical care in infancy takes place in everyday interactions with infants as part of cultural practices. These include using lullabies and play songs, which occur in every known culture. This type of infant-directed singing can help to soothe infants' distress and to strengthen bonds between carers and their infants. Musical care can also be targeted to support infants and caregivers experiencing challenges. This work draws on educational and clinical approaches which influence musical interventions and music therapy practices. For example, infants born with high-risk conditions receive care in neonatal intensive care units, or NICUs. Musical care may address some of the adverse effects of the NICU by reducing stress, providing a surrogate, supportive social signal, such as singing to the babies, and providing environmental enrichment. Targeted musical care has also been used to support maternal physical and mental health, especially in the area of maternal anxiety and postnatal depression. Musical care has also been part of sharing information about maternal and infant health. Musical care in infancy can involve the entire family unit and draws upon cultural musical practices. Musical care in infancy sets the stage for musical care in childhood, when developmental aspects often come to the fore.
Children can encounter musical care at school, at home, and in their spare time, when they're on their own or when they're with others. Musical care in childhood can support the development of individual children as well as nurture their relationships with the people around them. It has been used to support children of all abilities, including children with autism spectrum disorders. Children can engage in musical care in different ways by, for example, listening to music, learning it, or making it. Musical care can support children's physical, social, emotional, and cognitive developments. For example, musical care may support physical development through improved gross and fine motor skills, temporal coordination, strength, and greater ability to synchronise with others. Engaging in music with others, especially in group music making, can also help children's social, emotional development. It can do so through supporting their social relationships and bonding, shared attention, and communication skills, and helping them develop empathy. Musical care has also been shown to nurture children's self-esteem, confidence, and emotional regulation and stability. Musical care in childhood nurtures children's development as they learn to navigate the world around them. In adolescence, musical care can continue to support emotional development while also playing a role in the development of individual and social identity. Therefore, musical care can help adolescents to begin to find their place in this social world.
Music can be the soundtrack accompanying adolescence throughout this sometimes challenging stage of life. During adolescence, personal and social identities are formed, including the development of musical identities and preferences. Adolescents experience musical care in a variety of ways. For example, by listening to playlists or creating music by themselves or with friends. Musical creation in adolescence can take many forms, writing lyrics and songs or playing in informal music groups, as well as in more formal ensembles. These activities can help as adolescents start to form their own, as well as their social identities. The music we like can contribute to which social groups we identify with throughout our lives. But this connection between musical tastes and social groups is often particularly important in adolescence. Musical care can also be useful for mood regulation. For example, playing a specific song or creating music can help adolescents to cope with some of the difficult parts of growing up. For adolescents who are particularly struggling, for example with anxiety or depression, musical care may help reduce the severity of their symptoms and may also help them to connect with others who may be struggling like them. However, music has also been associated with the intensification and prolongation of difficult feelings. While emotional and identity development is a focus of musical care in adolescence, in adulthood, the responsibility of caring for others often begins to dominate. Musical care plays a role in supporting adults throughout their new and evolving roles. Hello again, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the first 4 videos, and thank you to George Waddell for sorting out the technical issues at the beginning there. So a key idea in this book is a call for interdisciplinary collaboration. And indeed, we set up the authorship of the chapters so that every chapter had at least one author from different disciplines. And so today we thought we would continue that invitation to dialogue among interdisciplinary perspectives by asking three speakers from different perspectives to respond to the book. And so to introduce those speakers and to welcome you to the Royal College of Music, I'm delighted to hand over to Diana Salazar, who's our Director of Programmes here at the Royal College of Music.
Thank you very much, Netta. Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to the Royal College of Music. As Netta said, I'm Diana Salazar. I'm Director of Programmes here at the college. Firstly, many congratulations to both Netta and Katie on this exciting new publication, which is extremely timely. All of us working in music have known for many years how music in its many forms can have a positive impact on people's lives. And during COVID, we've seen this amplified. Music became especially important for people, whether it's a meditation, solace, or a way of connecting with others. We also became acutely aware of the gap we feel when there's limited access to embodied music making. So as we emerge from the pandemic, there's no better time to look closely at the role of musical care, to do so robustly with supporting evidence, and to disseminate the findings about this really precious work and its impact. This text provides a wonderful collection of informed insights on the ways in which listening to, or performing, or creating music can enhance people's lives. It's at once comprehensive in its approach to covering all stages of the life course, and it's also inclusive in its openness to recognising many different practices. On that note, I'm particularly struck by the range of perspectives and disciplines represented in this book. And this makes a really powerful statement about the interconnectedness of music, the way in which music can bind us through shared experiences, and the way in which these experiences can be better understood by drawing upon different disciplines and different methods. In doing so, this book project recognizes that music exists in a vibrant ecology of art making and participation. But it also underlines that our understanding of musical care is deepened and enriched by these dialogues with other disciplines. The opportunity to collaborate with other disciplines is extremely important to raising awareness of the value of this field. So I'd like to say a big thank you from the Royal College of Music to all of the collaborators on this publication. It's a fantastic piece of work that you've produced, and it's through working together in this way that we can raise awareness of this work. At the Royal College of Music, the topic of musical care is really important to us. We train elite performers and composers who are at home on the concert platform, but we also want them to be equipped to make a positive impact on many different areas of society. We're delighted that our very first undergraduate elective module in musical care will run from September, headed up by the one and only Netta herself, and informed by the writings that we see in this publication. The opportunity for students to reflect on their practice through the lens of musical care is one of the most important skills we can nurture at the college, and it's a vital ingredient for developing the artist citizens of the future. Finally, I just want to recognise the innovative approach that we're seeing in the dissemination of this publication, and you've just witnessed that in the videos that you've seen. The publication itself includes web presence and this collection of fabulous animated videos in addition to the core text. At the Royal College of Music, we work with a wide range of stakeholders, whether scholars, practitioners, students, young and old, teachers, professionals, and audiences. So it's wonderful to see this publication existing in a variety of formats that will speak to the widest range of individuals. So congratulations to Netta and Katie, and I look forward to uncovering more through this afternoon's discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to invite the first of our three guest speakers today. A big warm welcome to Professor Raymond MacDonald, who is Chair of Music Psychology and Improvisation, who will give perspectives from music psychology.
I'm really delighted to get the chance to speak to you today, and I'm really honoured to get the chance to talk about the book. It really is a wonderful book, and I think that's the first thing I'd like to respond with is actually to say congratulations to everybody that's involved in the book. Musical care is the theme of the book, but I think actually a huge amount of care has been taken in constructing the book. Not just in terms of getting the chapters together, but the way in which the chapters articulate with each other. There's a really strong, cohesive, overarching narrative that links all the chapters together around musical care. I also think that the book looks beautiful, and it even feels beautiful. So the cover and the whole project, from the videos, the films that we've just seen, the way that the book's been put together, to the way in which the chapters articulate with each other, is just really, really exciting and really beautiful, and a lot of care has been taken in putting it together. So congratulations to everybody that's involved in the book. I was asked to respond to a couple of broad questions. What role do you see musical care playing in your field in terms of responding to the chapters in the book? So I was thinking of, yes, music psychology and music education in terms of how we use these types of new ideas, these new theories in musical care, and how we're teaching around music psychology and music education. And I felt one of the most important advances that's happening, and we see that happening around the world, is thinking of care for musicians' health, and the way in which we are much more aware of the stresses and strains that are placed upon music students, and in terms of preparing music students to move into a working environment, the sorts of psychological issues that they have to deal with in terms of working within the contemporary world. So I think care and the importance of the way in which musical issues merge with psychological issues, and particularly the way in which the book discusses, for example, the notion of musical identities, and the importance of developing a healthy musical identity. And a healthy musical identity can help predict musical engagement across the lifespan. It can also help predict how we can get benefit from being involved in musical activities across the lifespan. And I suppose if we're thinking of educating musicians, if we're thinking of not just educating musicians, but everybody's engagement with music within an educational context, in some respects could be framed around developing a positive musical identity. And Suvi Saracalio's chapter and Kat McFerm's chapter really digs into important detail about how musical identities develop and the important role that musical identities have in musical care. And I think that's becoming increasingly important when we look at educating musicians, not just at conservatoires and universities, but when we think about music education from the very beginning, the very earliest nursery engagement that children have with music. We are all musical, and we can all celebrate our universal creativity through music, and music plays a crucial role in not just developing creative skills, but plays a crucial role in how we bond in social groups. So I think that's certainly music education, musicians' health, and developing healthy musical identities is really important as well. I'm also thinking about the sorts of skills that we look to develop within music education context when we're using psychology and development in psychology. And I think the notion of musical virtuosity and virtuosity beyond the conventional, I think that's becoming increasingly important as well. So when we're training musicians, and also when we're thinking of children's earliest experiences of music, we're not just interested in developing technical skills, reading music, or command of your instrument, but perhaps we're starting to look beyond these types of conventional virtuosities, think about collaborative virtuosities, listening virtuosities, social virtuosities that are right at the heart of musical engagement. These types of virtuosities are really important, and I think this book also flags up how we can look beyond what we might have thought of conventional musical skill, and look at the way in which music can help to develop collaborative work. Music can help us understand how we socialise in group situations. And so when we're training musicians, when young people are getting involved in music, then they're involved in developing new types of virtuosities. So I'm thinking musical identities, musicians' health, new virtuosities. Another question that we were asked to think about when I was talking, when Netta and Katie Rose asked me to discuss the book was, what future directions do I see happening within this area? And another aspect of the book that I'm really struck by is the types of research that we see taking place now. We're very much moved beyond the old binaries of qualitative versus quantitative research, randomized controlled trials versus interviews and focus groups. We're seeing a whole new generation of what we want to call participatory models of research, where the boundaries between researcher and participant are becoming blurred. Perhaps we're thinking of a post-qualitative inquiry using artistic models of research, where participants get involved in playing music, and the playing of the music becomes an important part of that research process, and the playing of the music informs the way in which the researchers and the participants are working together. And I think we can see that in the book as well, across the book. We're no longer involved in what we might want to call these sort of oppositional binaries. There's a much more of a sort of a plurality of different approaches that involve participants getting involved in the research, and also artistic approaches to research as well, within what we want to call a post-qualitative inquiry. So I'm particularly struck at the way in which these different types of models of research are presented in the book. I think also another approach that is particularly exciting is the way in which therapeutic applications of music exist seamlessly with other approaches, community music, and the way in which these what we might want to call clinical approaches merge very elegantly with music education and with community music to produce this overarching notion of care and care in music. And I'm particularly struck by that theme in the book, and also we can see that these themes being played out globally as well. I'm actually just been reading Evan Rood's new book towards a sociology of music therapy, and I see a lot of links with what Evan Rood's talking about in terms of his notion of a health musician and health musicking, and the themes that are within this particular book talking about care for music and how musical care can be present in music education. It's at the heart of music therapy, and it's also involved in community music. So these issues are particularly important. I'm just checking my time, Netta. How am I doing for time? Have I got?
Thank you so much, Raymond. That's been wonderful, a wonderful introduction from you. And I think there's so much in there where you're provoking us to reflect on concepts like musical virtuosity, and maybe thinking about departing from these oppositions which we've been so used to. and embracing much more, as you said, pluralistic models, whether that's to do with methods of research or these different worlds where the therapeutic and the educational collide. And actually this book embraces that sort of melding of different fields and approaches. So that's been wonderful. Thank you so much, Raymond. We're going to move on to our next speaker, who is Helen Odell, OBE, who is Professor of Music Therapy and Director of the Cambridge Institute of Music Therapy Research. And she's going to give some perspectives from a music therapy standpoint. Over to you, Helen.
Hello, can you all hear me?
We can indeed,
oh,
and we can see your slides. Wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I really want to congratulate Netta and Katie Rose and all the authors and participants of this wonderful, much needed and welcome book. And I cannot imagine how to add to the comprehensive chapters. And I think this interdisciplinary approach is absolutely central to the future of the fields involved. And I've been asked to share some ideas about musical care and research in the future from a music therapy discipline background, but coming from a background in therapeutic communities in adult mental health settings, it's a joy to see how much collaboration and community taking responsibility for musical care is happening across the piece. And this book is so much needed. So particularly interesting is the concept and discussion on concurrent and magnet approaches to research in this book, about whether it's a true interdisciplinary collaborative project that's being focused on, or whether it's sort of people working in parallel. And so I was asked if I was going to share some video, and normally I would just focus at a book launch on only the material in the book. But I think that this book is going to strengthen the underpinning of different research that's needed in the future and also that's going on. And so, as the book suggests, the musicality within music therapy, including between musicians, including participants in this group I'm about to share an example of, is arguably the place to start good collaboration and partnerships. So a musical example from our Together in Sound project for people living with dementia and their companions. And thanks, Raymond, I'm sort of going to continue on and focus rather on the later part of life. And where people living with dementia and their companions come together for what's called group music therapy in a partnership with a concert hall, Saffron Hall Trust, a state-of-the-art concert hall venue in a comprehensive school, a many layered collaboration, which is a fitting way to start. So this project has expanded to a museum, and for rolling out the project, we are also looking at rolling it out across the UK. And Claire Molyneux, who's here, is undertaking the type of research that Raymond was referring to, that was around with Rowan and Reason in the early 70s and 80s for some of the work we've done, and then perhaps we've moved away from. And this is the idea of these research approaches are so important, analysing significant moments from the point of view of the participants. So I'm just going to include a film here, which was made by Claire and her colleagues, launched in 2022. And it was launched in the pandemic, but made through the voices of the participants. And I think it's self-explanatory and answers one of the questions of musical care.
There's no doubt there is a special place in the brain for music, which I think enhances our lives. I think it does.
Music seems to be the best therapy. Everything's in the wrong place. You see, it's music. That's miraculous, isn't it?
Yes. I find it an uplifting experience every Friday. I really look forward to coming, not only for myself, but for Brenda as well.
It's just the real kindness. I think kindness is what
Yes.
I'm very happy. There's the atmosphere somehow. It's very happy.
It's wonderful.
Atmosphere, isn't it?
So I think that the book supports this theme so strongly, and researchers are often looking for a wealth of different types of approaches, as Raymond said, and a true collaboration, I think, is where you work from the inside out and drawing across interpretative and objectivist paradigms, and this book is such a good example of that. The theme of training I wanted to talk about a bit emerges throughout the book, and I didn't know that you're launching this fantastic new course, and so that is going to support other initiatives. For example, our module we've launched with Britton Peers at Snape Maltings, which was about musicians and music therapists working together on continuous professional development, showed that following the module, about 100% of participants reported working in parallel changed their practice, and some haven't really worked in parallel with musicians. They're musicians themselves as music therapists, but working with performing musicians, jobbing every day. And in that previous example of our other project, you saw a trumpet player, a professional musician who's working and visiting with the music therapy group participants, which they value enormously. So elements of musical interaction can act as a link between internal and external states, and that music enables relationships to develop. And for example, between a person with dementia and their companion or family member, as Stuart Wood and Stephen Cliff discuss in the book. And intergenerational work through music is also developing across the world, which in some cultures has always been embedded, but which in others, and perhaps here in the UK for some moments, was in danger of disappearing, but is awakened by case studies in this book, as Katie Rose, Shannon Detoile, and Sandra Trehov described, for example, when looking at infant development, and the videos we've just seen are so brilliant in their animations. Intergenerational work emerges throughout the book, in fact, and that's, again, thinking of looking in the future of research and what's needed. Raymond talked about not being split between different types of research or having to choose between a randomized controlled trial or prioritizing that over another. And I would say that within a randomized controlled trial, there can be much collaboration, again, led by participants. And one called Homeside, which is a randomized control across Austria, Poland, Germany, Norway, and the UK, with Alzheimer's funding that in the UK, led by University of Melbourne, is one such example that I think this book really is relevant for. So we're comparing reading, a verbal interaction delivered by OTs, physios, lots of different team members, and music making training delivered by music therapists, but working in collaboration, true collaboration with the couples, and in fact delivered online because of the pandemic. So we've developed a music intervention for carers to use throughout their day, and that term is also debated in the book. Should we be talking about treatment, intervention, or musical care? And this is a new concept, or is it? Which I'll come to in my last point. But just as one more example of collaboration in practice, we've got 430 dyads across 5 countries who've participated in this project. And in this example, there's just a discussion as part of a round table again, where participants who've come through are part of the research team. And so they've determined how the research has been developing. And it's just a short conversation, again, with the voices speaking, underpinning some of the themes in the book about music and musical care.
Would you say, it sounds like you used music before the study, but would you say, how did this change your use, if it did, or did it just sort of encourage you to do those things you talked about, like first thing in the morning? And
well, from my perspective, it actually led me to understand more about the relationship between music and mood.
okay.
So that rather than just putting on a random selection of music, we could actually structure the music. After the intervention of working with Jodie, we could actually structure the music to fit the type of mood, or even use it to bring Jerry into a better mood than she was in.
Oh, that's really interesting. Ming's nodding a lot, because I think, don't know if you want to chip in there. Or Jerry, did you want to say something?
No, just thank you very much.
It's okay, Jerry.
So emerging from that project is something that I wanted to finally touch on before I come back to musical care. So I've read the book, and there are some connections with music technology, but I think that if I'm asked to comment on research in the future, I can see unfolding, which is actually contrary to many of our collaborations over the last 40, 50 years, which have been about making meaningful music, which is personalized for people in the room, where they're leading what's needed, and music making is happening between these people. But with technology, the University of Melbourne are taking elements from the home side intervention and working with technology companies, and they've launched today a call for people to take part in Match, which is about developing an app which is sort of developing using elements where people can use it on their own for care, even if they don't want to make acoustic music together. So that might be challenging for some of us, but it's very much, I think, a focus for the future. I'm happy to share these slides if anybody wants, but I just want to say that the final thing is, I think that musical care is the most fantastic concept. And in a last research project where we're working with 13 care homes with Anchor Care Home, which is a UK-based set of care homes, music therapy is new, and they've been using music making, and they have many people, residents and staff, who are very able and who use music embedded in the care. But they've come up with the term musical care plan, and we're researching how musical care plans might be rolled out in this new environment. So I was particularly excited by this project, and I just want to congratulate you all and thank you for asking me to speak, which is a real honour, and congratulations to all.
Thank you very much, Helen, for those really fantastic insights and your reflections there. You've left us with lots to think about by sort of highlighting how technology might offer new opportunities. And I love this idea of musical care plans, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity during questions later to explore some of that. Finally, I'd like to move on to our third speaker, who is Dr. Alain Gregoire, who's a perinatal psychiatrist and honorary president of Maternal Mental Health Alliance UK. He is going to give some perspectives on the health sciences.
Thank you very much. It really is a huge pleasure to join you in celebrating and in discussing this new book, and all the thought and effort that's gone into, shall we say, composing it. Actually, it feels a bit paradoxical because I know very little about musical care, but of course, that's exactly why the book is so very welcome. Most of my colleagues working in healthcare around the world know little or actually nothing about this amazing opportunity on offer. It's also a bit of a personal irony because I and just about everybody who knows me well would describe me as completely unmusical. But I think we should stop and think for a moment about what we mean by that in general use. Yeah, you know, that there are many people like me. I've got little or no musical language, despite some musical education when I was a child. I really, really honestly can't distinguish one note from another or know when I'm singing the right one. Despite repeated explanations, I've got absolutely no sense of what an octave is. I mean, I know what it is intellectually because people have explained it to me, but it makes absolutely no sense to me at all. I just can't get that things go up and down, as I've been told. However, I can absolutely blissfully sing to myself completely out of tune. And yet, as for almost all humans, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, music moves me to the core. It can change my mood states. It can change my levels of mental and physical energy and arousal. It can change my patterns of thinking, my activity, my creativity. And, you know, it's a two-way interaction. There are times when I know exactly what I want or even need to listen to. There are times when others can reach me through music in a way that they really couldn't through speech or action. I can absolutely identify that I can feel more intensely my relationships with people through music, with landscapes, with events in the past, in the present, and in the future as well. And I think everywhere where there are humans, there is music. It's actually the only truly international language. And I think, well, I know from the little I know about this, that this was always so. You know, archaeological evidence of Paleolithic bone flutes tells us that humans have known and enjoyed this, what could we call it, this neuropsychosocial phenomenon for at least 30, 40,000 years, I believe. And beliefs about the healing benefits of music are documented throughout ancient history. And of course, throughout cultures, throughout anthropological research. In our modern Western culture, the absolutely essential role and huge power of music is completely unquestioned in for example, filmmaking. My daughter works in film and trained in filmmaking alongside composers, and it would be completely unthinkable to have films without music. You know, what would Bond be without the theme tunes? Completely embedded in advertising. And my goodness, do advertisers go on the evidence base? You know, if what they do doesn't work, they ditch it. And music is totally central to effective advertising. People of my generation, you know, we all remember the Hamlet cigar advert music. I actually can't name what it is, very well-known tune, and I'm sure you experts in music will know instantly. But you know, I can sing out of tune the Lenore tune from when I was a child watching ITV. Can you believe it? I won't do it because my wife would beat me up if she even heard it through closed doors. It's central to marketing, actually politics. You only have to watch, American politics, certainly, the salesmanship of politics, absolutely revels and thrives on the music. Entertainment, of course, very obvious. Physical fitness, it motivates people to exercise till they're red in the face and sweating. And of course, many, many, many more areas of human mental and physical engagement. So hang on a minute. I'm talking from the perspective of healthcare. It's completely baffling that it's taken us so long in our modern, so-called evidence-based Western systems of care to begin to consider even the role of music as a routine or fundamental therapeutic tool. It's still seen as a kind of rarefied, also ran add-on, and is largely, in fact, almost entirely dismissed. If I look back on my career, certainly of 40 years in the NHS, I could probably count on the fingers of one hand when the possibility of using music has even been mentioned or entertained, let alone used. Completely bonkers when you think about the knowledge we have. Now, I fully embrace a scientific approach to increasing human knowledge. It allows us to set aside myths and to increase our effectiveness in everything we do. And yes, of course, that takes time, but the translation of that knowledge into action is frustratingly and completely unnecessarily slow. And I think in part that's because of the silos created by our ever-growing knowledge, which demands a kind of shrinking of domains of expertise without the necessary compensatory interdisciplinary collaboration that must go together with this necessary shrinking and these in a way necessary silos because of the amount of knowledge that's now out there. And I think this book will without any doubt contribute to us all reaping the benefits of what's already known, but also inspire further multidisciplinary scientific exploration. And that there are plenty of opportunities for getting on with implementing current knowledge. So in my field of maternal and paternal mental health, and it's exactly that aspect of our human functioning that parents and that society depend on for nurturing the next generation. It's clear from evidence that we already have that music could play a much greater beneficial role used by parents for themselves and for their fetuses and babies during labor, for example, natural or cesarean, because we know that it improves the functioning of surgeons as well as recovery of patients, and throughout our systems of care. We know, for example, that music can produce physiological signs of relaxation in fetuses. And we even are beginning to understand which pieces of music seem to do that better than others, like, Mozart's very aptly named Eine kleine Nachtmusik. And anxiety and low mood in mums, which are two of the core features of just about every mental health problems, can be reduced by participation in music or singing. During labor, listening to music can reduce labor pain, labor duration, and the need for interventions, let alone actually improving surgical outcomes. And postnatally, there are wide-ranging documented benefits of music for mothers and for their babies, and the benefits of music, of course, as you must read in this book, continue throughout the human lifespan, not just at this amazing transition from one generation to the next. So, these opportunities ought to be music to the ears of all of us involved in nurturing or supporting or caring for ourselves and for others at every level. And even better in many cases, implementing this powerful musical resource can be relatively cheap or even free. And in fact, I wonder if that isn't partly why it gets so little attention compared to expensive machines that just go beep. When you have to spend a lot of money, you spend a lot of time thinking about it. When things are cheap, you don't even bother to discuss it. Which seems completely ridiculous, but it's that sort of problem is rife in our systems of care and certainly healthcare. Just another point I'd like to make, and I'm probably running out of time, but this is such an exciting book. There's so much to say, so please give me another minute. One of the most important lessons about mental and physical health and well-being that science has demonstrated in the last couple of decades is the profound importance of taking a developmental life course perspective to our understanding and our protection of lifelong health. The strongest predictor of our health throughout our lives, physical or mental, and even how long we live, of our happiness, our prosperity, our productivity, our social functioning, is the quality of our very earliest life experiences. So, we are learning that a life course perspective is completely essential to care and to nurture of humans. And the authors beautifully demonstrate the value of that approach in their exploration of musical care. So I'd conclude by just saying, the power of music, listening or feeling or creating, individually or collectively, really must no longer be ignored in our care systems. And I really applaud the authors for highlighting and informing what must, for all our sakes, become an essential aspect of human care for ourselves and for each other. I'll stop there. I'll shut up. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. It was so wonderful to hear all of our speakers, and thank you also, Diana, for the wonderful introductions and for your insights at the very beginning of this discussion. We're actually perfectly on time, which is fantastic. And what I'd like to do now is open up room for discussion. So if anybody has any questions in the chat, you can put them in now for our speakers. And we also have Nick and Daniel online as well, who are very open to answer questions about already some of the animated videos that you've had so far. Just to, I don't see any questions yet, but just to pick up on some of the chats that's been happening, I think, with some of the speakers is, Ray, I think you wanted to respond specifically to something that Alan said, or to bring up some more points. So I'll give you the stage here to start the discussion.
Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, Alan's fascinating talk just resonated with me in terms of some of the themes in the book, and also some of the big themes around general musicality. I think this notion of the individual being the site of all creativity, an individual musician or even an individual researcher bringing to bear their ideas. I think the book, because it's so collaborative, really highlights the importance of distributed creativity. And I think we're seeing these themes very much within music as well, that we can creativity doesn't reside within the individual necessarily, it resides within the collective groups in which people are working. And I think particularly when people say, oh, I am not musical, and I think because Alan said himself that he wasn't musical, yet he gave wonderful examples of how everybody is actually musical, and the way in which babies can communicate with their parents, the importance that music has in these early bonding relationships. And I'm actually right now really lucky. I'm living in an art gallery for a month. You can see I'm actually in an artist studio working on a project that's exploring distributed creativity and working with an artist who say, oh, I'm not musical. We've been charged with a project to produce new work that we all collaborate on, where artists get involved in music and the musicians get involved with the artists. But one of the artists, resolutely, fabulous artist, she says, I'm not musical, I can't play music. And so we've been working on scores that will allow the artists to get involved in the music. And just last night we were, came up with a musical score here where the artists can play on a grand piano these notes whenever they want to play these notes, and we'll be making percussive sounds based upon these letters here. But the idea is that we're all involved in creating the art, and we're all involved in creating the music, but not in a kind of patronising way, to try and get people really engaged in creating music and art together. And I suppose my point here is that that we are all musical, and a lot of the sort of education and a lot of the psychology of music around musical engagement needs to target this notion of musicality and creativity being something that defines our humanity. And I think within the book we see these themes absolutely crystal clear, and also the notion of collaboration and interdisciplinary collaboration being right at the heart of contemporary academic research, but also right at the heart of, I think, contemporary artistic practice, to move beyond individualistic notions of creativity, individualistic notions of virtuosity, individualistic notions of expertise, that actually we are all involved in creating knowledge. We're all involved in creating music together. We're all composers. We're all music. I realise now I'm actually ranting, and I should just do that Zoom thing where I just stop talking and hand back to you.
No, that was great. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think we get lots of claps and a here, Raymond. So lots of people agreeing with your points. Actually, to sort of talk about different art forms and creativity, I know because Nick is here, I'd love to maybe ask a little bit about the creative experience. Again, we sort of maybe a little bit meta, but we're sort of talking about arts and sciences through an art form that is not, animated videos, as well as through music. And we did in our brief talk about how would you respond to this as an artist, and how would you respond to this as a composer when talking about developing these videos. So maybe I can hand it off to Nick for a little bit.
Thank you, Katie Rose, and thank you everyone for having me. I feel very underqualified in this room with all these people, but it's a real privilege to be here and to actually talk about the project. So yeah, in answer to your question, it was really refreshing actually for a client, you, to come to us and actually sort of say, how would you approach this? Typically we receive a brief and it's, this is the concept for the visual aspect, this is a concept for the audio. But here we had someone approaching us and sort of saying to us, we want to think of this like an audio-visual piece. So from the word go, really, we could think about how do we want it to sound? How did we want the various visual materials to sort of appear in audio form? And that was really refreshing, and it kind of influenced the different styles that I know the composer Daniel used throughout the series, and also the evolution of the music throughout the series as well. So yeah, it was great, and I think we really went into the project because of the interdisciplinary aspect and the fact that we could just think of it as a bit more than just a visual piece.
That's great. Thanks so much, Nick. And now we're going, Helen, did you want to respond? I saw maybe.
Well, so I just wanted to give an anecdote, actually, just move from my research hat and respond to what Nick said about, I feel I can't remember exactly what you said, but it's the idea of innate musicality is so fundamental that, and I do think things have shifted. So I've just become a grandmother, and my son and daughter-in-law are not, they know about music, but it's not their field at all. And they've been saying, but it's a very good idea. We've been taught to use music and to sing and make music, and this has been embedded in all their classes and NCT and everything, like a musical care that's embedded, that's come back to me now, seeing how how embedded this way of thinking is, and also informed by attachment theory linked to music, and the work of Malach and Srivathan really, is mainstream. I suppose that's my point, just to add a sort of non-research anecdote, saying I do think since I qualified in the mid-70s, things have moved on from that point of view, and that music is embedded in, there's a long way to go. And I would say that there is a lot of music prescribed and going on through social prescribing. Maybe that's coming up later. And also in the NHS, through ways that people are collaborating. And but yeah, I think I'm now rambling, Raymond. I'm going to stop. But this book, I must say, I couldn't put it down actually. So thank you.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you so much. I think we have one question actually, and I think we have about 2 minutes left of this section. So does anyone have any reflections on how musical care interacts with musical harm? Is that a concept that is addressed in the book at all? And I will say definitely in the synthesis, we did talk about caveats about that there is this assumption that music is always helpful, but actually we are now learning that that is not always the case, and to be careful about some of those caveats. But if any of the speakers want to talk a little bit about that idea.
Well, I would be interested to hear from authors about whether you feel you've really covered this. I think this is an area that needs to be researched much more fully, and the chair in the Royal College of Music spoke about care for musicians, and I think particularly in some areas of the music industry there is a real issue about, well, which would lead you to question how healthy being a musician can be in some contexts. And I think that that's something, if it's not fully addressed enough right now, it's definitely something we should be collaborating on. The links between the harmful aspect of the addictive side maybe of music, or yeah.
And I know that in the adolescence chapter, Suvi and Katrina did talk about unhelpful ways of using music, especially in adolescence, where music is such an important part of our identities and things like that. So it is discussed, but it was definitely something that we talked a lot about, that this needs more investigation and there needs to be more work in this area. Alan, did you want to say something?
Oh, I was just going to make a gratuitous remark. I think if you went into a labor room and the midwife was playing Apocalypse Now, the Ride of the Valkyries loudly, you might be so terrified that you completely seize up and the baby would never arrive. So, clearly, anything that is powerful, just like pharmaceuticals, just like psychotherapies, can be harmful as well as beneficial. And yeah, we need to understand that. But there's going to be a limit to the research, isn't there? You can't research every piece of music that's ever been composed in every conceivable situation. So there's going to be a limit to the level of detail, and maybe the sophisticated research will research how good humans are at, or clinicians are maybe, or patients or people are at choosing what is good for them, or predicting what is going to be good for them. Yeah, it's not going to be like drugs research, which is pretty crap anyway, to be perfectly honest. Even the billion-dollar randomized controlled trials are so biased and irrelevant that they're almost useless. So let's not get too high horses about science, but let's think carefully about some of these issues.
I think that's a really good point, and I think we're going to have to end there. But just to say that Shannon also said that Shannon also said that it was discussed in the infant chapter as well as the synthesis. So it was a point that was drawn out throughout the book, but definitely could use a little bit more understanding. But so I think we're going to, there's also a point in the chat. If people have felt, we can maybe address some questions in the chat, speakers, that I haven't been able to get to in the discussion. So from here, we're now actually going to play more videos, and I think we've got our tech hopefully working this time. So we're going to play the last 4 videos. So I'm going to put the link of the YouTube channel just in case on your end it's a little bit slow. But please enjoy the last 4 videos of the series, which will take us from adulthood to the synthesis. So enjoy, get your popcorn out. Thank you so much.
As adults, we encounter music in our everyday lives. We hear it in shops, we listen to it on our own, and we may even make it with others. It infiltrates all aspects of our lives, even if only for brief moments at a time. Adults not only need to care for themselves, but they are often responsible for caring for others, be it for their children, for their parents, or as part of their profession. Taking on all these roles can be difficult, and musical care might help. In adulthood, musical care can act as a form of self-care, reducing stress, improving mood, or bringing people together. Unlike other times in our lives, in adulthood we are often outside formal systems that can also care for us. We're usually no longer going to school or in long-term care. Music can become a form of care, particularly by helping create social support networks through, for example, community music activities like joining music groups. In addition, when things go wrong, with sudden illness or injury, music therapy or other targeted types of musical care can help adults cope and support their mental and physical well-being. In adulthood, we often hold the responsibility for caring for others and for ourselves. In older adulthood, we often return to being the ones cared for or supported.
As we get older, we tend to need more support and care. This care can happen in a hospital, a care home, at home, or in the community. In older adulthood, musical care is usually experienced in directed or targeted ways. For example, through music therapy, through getting involved in a choir or music group, or by listening to musical performances. Musical care can help older adults flourish. For example, musical care in older adulthood has been shown to have a positive impact on mental well-being by helping those who may feel lonely to connect with others around them and by lifting their mood. Musical care in older adulthood has also been shown to have physical effects by helping older adults with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease breathe better and those with Parkinson's disease walk more steadily while being supported by a musical beat. Musical care, either through music therapy sessions or by listening to familiar music, can also support adults living with dementia, by even just briefly bringing back memories of their past, helping them to relax, or helping them to connect with their family members. In care homes, musical care is often focused on addressing the needs of the residents, including their chronic pain and mental and physical well-being. More generally, musical care can positively influence the experience of being in the care home for healthcare workers, other staff, and visitors. At the end of life, musical care broadens out even more to support individuals, their family, and their community.
At the end of life, music can be a resource for people and communities as they cope with change, loss, and grief. Musical care can offer a sense of well-being and support quality of life for the dying person, their family, and their wider community. Within palliative care, which happens at the end of life, musical care can be encountered in everyday experiences and in targeted activities such as music therapy. Music therapy in palliative care can support management of physical symptoms, psychological adjustment, emotional expression, and resilience for the dying person. Music therapy can also support their existential contemplation, as well as self-awareness and a sense of well-being. Musical care can also support families and carers by providing another way of interacting with the dying person and other family and friends. Musical care can also play a role later on in bereavement. More broadly, live music performance in healthcare settings can provide a creative environment for the residents and their carers, and a place to die with dignity. Musical care at the end of life can also include one's own music for self-care, often in the form of music listening. As in other life stages, listening to music can help people understand, regulate, and express emotions associated with pain, loss, and grief. Death and dying remain taboo topics for many. Musical care can help people discuss and learn about this part of life. For example, community choirs and intergenerational projects that reach beyond the hospice can engage children and the local community in discussions about the end of life. Musical care at the end of life looks towards the individual, their family, friends and carers, and the community beyond.
Musical care runs throughout the life course. Its areas of potential impact, who it touches, and what it looks like ebb and flow depending on where we are in our lives. Musical care's potential impacts on cognition, emotion, mental and physical health, identity, education, and relationships receive different levels of attention at different life stages, in different circumstances, and depending on the individual's specific needs. While mental health and well-being are represented throughout the life course, during the beginning of our lives, especially in infancy and childhood, musical care can support development in the areas of cognition, emotion, and physical capacity. As we age, especially during older adulthood and at the end of our lives, musical care can help support these areas as we begin to struggle with them. In the middle of our lives, musical care can play a role in identity formation in adolescence and in self-care in adulthood. Musical care can address these needs for individuals, families, and communities. Painted broadly, musical care seems to follow an hourglass pattern, starting with infants within a family unit, focusing in on children as individuals, broadening out to peer groups and adolescents, taking on familial roles in adulthood, extending to community groups in older adulthood, and finally addressing all of these individuals and groups at the end of life. The forms of musical care can also ebb and flow. In many Western cultures, music listening seems dominant, but formal and informal musical activities happening in public and private spaces make up the rich fabric of our musical soundscape. Some people will never participate in formal music therapy sessions. Some people will never sing in a choir. Some people will prefer other forms of creative engagement entirely. But many people will have some engagement with music at some time, whether or not they see that engagement as an explicit part of care. We hope that this series of videos has given you examples of how musical care can accompany us throughout our lives. These videos are based on research from numerous disciplines, including music therapy, music psychology, sociology, neuroscience, and education. Musical care is evolving, depending on local customs, norms, and habits, on changing educational, medical, and social advice, and is in need of much more research. Even though musical care has been part of our lives for a very long time, there are many open questions regarding the evidence and possible reasons for its potential beneficial effects. We hope this series inspires you to develop your research or practice in connection to musical care, participate in research projects, or learn more about the area. To find out more, take a look at the book we edited and that inspired the series of videos. It's called Collaborative Insights Interdisciplinary Perspectives on Musical Care Throughout the Life Course.
Thank you so much, and we hope that you enjoyed the videos. So the next portion of today, and actually the last portion before we close, is a panel with all of our authors. And we're just going to share a slide here that shows all of the authors that were a part of this book. So you can see them listed there. So we'd like to thank all of you. You can tell it was a large team from many different disciplines, experts really in their field. So we thank all the authors and congratulate all of them. And then we also now have a panel. And these are the people that are going to be joining us on the panel. So we have Shannon and Sandra, who collaborated with me in writing the infancy chapter. Tilhen, unfortunately, is ill, so can't join us today. But we have Yogas, who co-wrote the end of life chapter, and Ian Cross, who also co-wrote the end of life chapter. Sorry, the synthesis chapter. So what I'm going to do now is stop sharing screen and bring all the authors. So if you can share your screens or turn your videos on so I can see you all. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start by asking all of our panelists, what role do you see musical care playing in your field? So I'm just going to start actually with Sandra, if you want to go first. Thanks for being here, Sandra.
Hi. Well, I guess a few years ago, I would have been more pessimistic about the prospects of musical care having an important role within psychology and developmental psychology in particular. But things are changing. Things have changed a lot. And the pandemic, surprisingly, one of the beneficial effects, even though there were so many harmful effects, but one of the beneficial aspects was that it made people, forced people to sort of renew themselves as researchers or reinvent themselves. And we saw lots of research. So people who were laboratory researchers but didn't have access to their laboratories, suddenly devising ways of doing controlled research under controlled conditions, and yet having it done in the homes of, say, mothers and infants, for example, but with the same kinds of controls that would be exercised in the laboratories. So I think that those experiences of being really creative about how research is conducted and the need for care of some kind that everybody experienced during the pandemic made people a lot more open to the notion of application, even in corners of psychology where that wasn't necessarily a welcome addition. So it seems to be now, and I think things have changed in the world and people are much more open to the notion that we all need care of one kind or another. So I think it's going to play an increasingly prominent role even within mainstream psychology.
Thank you so much. And I'll move straight on to Shannon, who also wrote the infancy chapter. Yeah.
Right. So Netta, to be clear, you'd like me to touch on how the idea of musical care relates to my profession.
Yeah. So what role do you see musical care playing in your field?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So coming from the discipline of music therapy, I think the term musical care it's synonymous. Music therapy is musical care. That's what we do. We use music to help people either learn or develop functional skills that for whatever reason they haven't yet, whether that be to developmental disability, medical condition, etc. Or we use music to help people rehabilitate or relearn skills that maybe they've lost due to neurologic insult, medical condition, etc. And basically helping people move through all the transitions of their life using music. So I think this is a beautiful way of explaining it that perhaps will make it a bit more appealing to people that are not yet familiar with music therapy, or have maybe some preconceived notions about music therapy, that this, I think, just makes it a lot more palatable, calling it musical care.
That's great. Thank you so much, Shannon. And now I'll move to Yogas, who co-wrote the End of Life chapter.
Thank you, Katie Rose. And I mean, yeah, coming from a music therapy perspective myself as well, I would resonate a lot with what Shannon has just said. I would like to add that obviously music therapy, resonates very much in practice with that notion of musical care, but it is conditioned by different professional regulations and boundaries and borders, which, if I may say, at times that has been useful for people, service users, professionals, but also at times that has created barriers in what musical care means, especially when we think about collaboration. And I find it very interesting that in this book and the endeavor, we talk about interdisciplinary collaboration. And perhaps it's interesting to think to what extent this collaboration happens actually on practice, so beyond the disciplinary discourse, if you like, but actually happens in practice, and to what extent also happens on the level of professional lives and discourse. Because sometimes I think there are sometimes dissonances between the discourse that we have in the professions and the discourse that we have in our disciplines. And I think what happens on the practice level, we all have to learn loads about that and allow it to breathe and really inform what happens in our disciplines, in our professions. And as a music therapist, very often what I find, and I work in end-of-life care with adults and bereaved families, what I very often find is that people do use music as a resource for their own coping, but having gone many of them through long and long-winded medical interventions, somehow their own resources, including music, may have faded out. So by the time that I see people in end-of-life care, very often people have lost their own health connection with music as a resource. So sometimes my own caring as a music therapist has to do with helping the individual, helping the person, their family, to re-establish their own care for music as a resource in their own life, in their own living, but also in their ways of coping with change and loss.
That's great. Thank you so much, Yogas. So now I'll move to Ian. So the same question, what role do you see musical care playing in your field?
Thank you very much, Katie Rose. It's quite a difficult question to answer because I'm really coming from the field of music and science, trying to make sense of music from scientific perspectives while maintaining a close awareness of the cultural nature of music. And in some ways, musical care falls out of some of the questions that one asks, such as, where does music stop? What is music? Or what forms does music take in different cultures, in different societies? Or where should notions of, let's call it, applied instrumentality be used in music education? So should we be educating students to engage with music for its own sake or for other reasons? And perhaps finally, and most importantly, how do we get the notion of musical care recognized as central within a contemporary culture that trivializes the idea of music, trivializes and commodifies it? And thinking of that in particular, having participated in an all-party parliamentary group on music education last week, and it seemed very much that rational argument supported by hard evidence might not be enough. The decision makers and opinion formers, well, yes, they're interested in music. They're interested in the notion of music as having value for itself. But I think one of the things that music and science is showing is that musical care is one of the core values of music. Music is not necessarily some sort of transcendental, floaty, abstract phenomenon. It's stuff that does us good when we do it, particularly when we do it with each other. When we make music together, things happen. And perhaps in this case, the best way of getting the opinion formers and decision makers to understand this point is by getting them to make music together. That way, they might actually understand its potency. It might become immediately evident for them. Just finishing briefly with an anecdote. About 20 years ago, I was involved in a conference on music and evolution. And myself and an ethnomusicologist, Liz Talbot, were the only, if you like, quote, music people there. The rest were anthropologists, biologists, chemists even, anthropologists, archaeologists, neuroscientists. And Liz and I spent the first couple of days banging on about the idea that music it's not just sound, it's not just abstract sound, it's something that changes you when you do it, particularly when you make music together. This is a commonplace idea in ethnomusicology. It just wasn't getting through. Every time we said it, no light bulbs were going on. One evening, the organizers had organized a music workshop with a fabulous music educationalist from South Africa and Brazil. He came on into the center of the crowd, played a Charlie Parker riff on a piece of dried seaweed, which rather caught our attention, and then got us all to make music together by giving us a short piece of pipe. We held it against our palm and blew across it. And those of us he suspected might be able to keep in time had rattles strapped around our legs. The only rules being we should follow him in time with him, and if we heard someone doing what we were doing, we should do something else. This went on for about 45 minutes. And in fact, in the end, a photograph of it appeared in Science magazine. But the next day, everyone knows that music is an interactive phenomenon. Music is predominantly concerned with well-being. Everyone knows that. We've all known that. Get people to make music together. It's the best way of getting them to understand the key and core of this book, that music is something that is a phenomenon, a human activity that is central to human well-being.
That was really great. Thank you so much, Ian. I think the next question I'm actually just going to pose to all the panelists, and go ahead and chime in as you'd like. And the question is really sort of about the process of making the book. So the question is, what was your experience of participating in this book project? If anyone wants to go first.
Katie Rose, if I may go on a very kind of practical level, what it meant for us. So that our chapter was co-edited by myself, Tamsin Dives, who's a music therapist and has a background as an opera singer as well, and Joe Hockley, who's a palliative care specialist nurse. And it's interesting because the three of us have had an interesting kind of professional trajectory, working in the same organization over a decade ago, I think now. And we realized that actually we never really dwelled into each other's practices before writing this chapter. So we knew of each other's practices a bit. And this is what led to me inviting Joe as well, being our co-author. But it was really through the process of writing that we started unpacking, and I was trying to explain to Joe what was the difference between music therapy and community music, for example. And we were trying to articulate our practice and our different intention between different practices. And equally, Joe could convey through her own practices how, for example, doing sensory work with people with advanced dementia in care homes was incorporating music. And it's interesting because we overlapped for about 5 years. We were working in the same hospice, the three of us, but we had never had these conversations together. And it made me think as an author why that happens in organizations. And I realized that happens, in my current working environment as well, that you are surrounded by so many interesting people doing such relevant work, but we don't have enough opportunities to sit down and learn about each other's practice. And I don't know whether we all, from this kind of collaborative experience of the book, I don't know whether we have any kind of tips and ideas to share with each other, but also with our audience, if you like, about how to create actually these opportunities more often, and we don't have to wait for chapters to be co-authored.
Maybe some of the other panelists could speak to that more generally, not necessarily focused on the book, but how do you see sort of opportunities for collaboration and interdisciplinary working happening in the future within sort of the realm of musical care? How can we facilitate more of that?
Well, one thing that the book does is shows that the sort of disciplinary barriers and silos do get in the way, and they're not necessary. That is, community music, music therapy, music education. It's all about music in many respects. And it's a question of finding ways in which people can understand each other's perspectives, as well as practices. And Georgios was talking about a very specific instance of music therapists working in the same context, but not being aware quite of what each other is doing. That goes at a slightly higher level, perhaps for, say, music educationalists and music therapists, who may be doing, in some respects, very similar things. But it can be very helpful if each becomes aware of what it is that they are trying to do, and what methods, what practices they have developed. Sharing practice is probably a very good way of doing things, and it probably has to happen out with the contexts of, if you like, established disciplinary institutions, the music therapy conference, the music education conference. There needs to be something that's a bit more messy, with a bit more slip and slop in it.
That's great. Sandra, I think, did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, I guess in my experience working with a couple of collaborators, so you were from psychology, but nevertheless with very different perspectives from my own very different, scientific practices, so to speak, and then Shannon from a different field. And so we were coming together first as people who had not worked with each other, but it was also clear that the differences that we had in perspective from our disciplinary corners, created some kind of challenges. Now, fortunately, it was all done in a respectful way. I've been in contexts where that hasn't been done respectfully, but nevertheless, the barriers to interdisciplinary collaboration are real. And sometimes you saw that, well, we speak the same language, but only at some certain level. It was called English. But nevertheless, the jargon in different corners of our disciplines was different. And that also creates a barrier to communication. Okay. And, so when you come from psychology or science or the more sciencey aspects of it, the whole notion of reproducibility. So, it isn't a question of truth in that you're reaching truths or anything like that. But if you can't really reliably reproduce what it is you're talking about, well, its value in terms of care, say in medical settings, for example, is going to be very limited. So, and that's something that still remains a barrier across disciplines. So we won't see widespread adoption of something like music therapy, even in domains where it could be very valuable, until we meet the same standards that, a drug has to meet for efficacy or anything like that. So, interdisciplinary barriers, you cross disciplines for the purposes of this book, but there are tremendous challenges in doing so, and particular challenges in doing collaborative research, as valuable as it is.
Definitely. And I think we tried as best we could to discuss some of those challenges, but they really are quite difficult. And that's, I think, why it's so seldom that you see truly interdisciplinary collaborative research really coming out. So that was sort of a push for our book to sort of push that forward. We have a couple of minutes and maybe quite brief sort of notes about sort of what future directions do you think? You know, we have lots of maybe early career researchers and students on this call. So what are the next directions for musical care research? In a couple of words. Your thoughts? Yeah.
Katie Rose, can I share? I'm just going to come at this very strongly as a music therapist, as a music therapy educator, a music therapy researcher. I think it's always important if we're looking for music to have some kind of influence or impact or generate some kind of outcome. I think a critical piece of that is having an awareness of what is the mechanism? How is the music doing that? And not looking at music as just a magic potion that's going to cure all ills, but we don't really know how it happens. Because then getting back to what Sandra was saying about replication, if you don't know the mechanism, it makes it extremely hard to replicate and to have any kind of consistency. So I'm just putting that out there. Again, anytime we're looking for music to achieve a certain outcome, we have to be clear on, or at least have a theory about what is the underlying mechanism of change.
If I could just pick up on that briefly, and that's where music therapists and people, psychologists and music scientists really need to talk to each other to understand what the important questions are and the hard questions are, and work together on those, because we still know very little.
Definitely. So if there's, Yoras, go ahead.
Yes, I think it was, I just want to add to what Ian and Sam really have said, to add the word context in that, because I think one of the main critiques that some of these approaches have received in the past years is that we may try to understand the mechanism out of context, or mechanism as a universal mechanism. And my own personal, if you like, take on that is that there's no such a thing, and we can understand things that are transferable from context to context, but we always need to understand how music in care or music for care is played out in context, in action, and somehow we as researchers, if you like, how in some ways to take ourselves out of the way in some ways, to let the phenomenon just speak for itself, and us asking, you know, if you like, important questions that matter in that context. But there is a risk, I think, in epistemological violence, that we impose what we think is happening before really understanding what is happening and what is the subjective experience of people. So I think we are in this magnificent field of trying to balance these different dynamics of you know, what we observe, what we understand, and how we position ourselves in these understandings.
So I think we're out of time for the panel. I'd like to thank all four of you. Thank you so much for being here and for speaking about sort of your experience very briefly, and also for all the work that you did for the book. Also, thank you to all the authors, other authors who are on this call. Thank you so much. Obviously, this book is really a culmination of all of our hard work. So congratulations, authors. Thank you so much. Transition.
Complete. Thank you to the speakers that we just had, to the authors. It's lovely to see you again, if only online. It feels like we bookended the process just a little bit. We had an authors meeting just before the writing began that some of the authors were at, and now we have some of the authors coming again together at the end, and echoing Katie Rose's work. Thank you for for working through the hard stuff together. It's not an easy project that we put together. We've made it look, no, we have tried to make it look all slick and pretty, but there's a lot of hard thinking and work that's gone into this, not just the authors, the reviewers, and the whole team around it. So thank you for that. I hope you have enjoyed today's session as a celebration of your time and work. Thank you also to the speakers before. It was really lovely to hear those responses from really quite different perspectives, and made me think about the many perspectives that we haven't presented today, but we hope we will bring into the conversation over time. So as part of that continuing conversation, as we mentioned at the beginning, there's the Musical Care International Network that is now up and running. There's a link to join it at the very, very top of the chat. If you scroll up, it's the third or fourth comment. I think Katie Rose might recopy it down at the bottom. We co-run this actually with Bonnie McConnell, who's an ethnomusicologist from the Australian National University. Again, a kind of effort to try and broaden our perspectives. And we set that network up in recognition of limitations of our book, including the fact that most of the chapters are written by people who live and work in English-speaking countries, and it's time to look beyond those areas. But everybody that's on this call is welcome to join the network, or if you know somebody that might be interested. We're very open at the moment. We're also very informal in our chats. We're trying to make something that is useful and helpful for the people that join us along the way. So maybe that's one way to keep the conversation going. And I think
we're now ready for a toast. So those of you who have a drink, we'll do a little toast to everyone. Yay, thank you so much. Congratulations again to the authors of the book, and thank you for attending today. And remember, you can order the book, you can use the videos, they're for free, use them for public engagement, communicating as much as you can. Thank you so much. So thank you everyone, and cheers. Cheers everyone. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Ray. Great drink, Ray.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Congratulations to all.
Thank you.
And for this event as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.